So for the rest of today, guys, I have two main concepts to introduce, and they're going to be really important for what your assignment's going to be. And if you reference the half-done syllabus that you received, the assignment, I think I called it something like landscape aperture project or something like that. But the idea is that you're going to have to create aperture in what is otherwise limited to be a sort of topographic surface. So the aperture functions with Grasshopper are very, very dynamic, I like to think, because you can do things in a way that's either based by inclusions or exclusions or patterns, or you could even do distance measurement based dissolves or gradients across surfaces. So I'm going to introduce two basic generators for that kind of a system. Okay, so the first of which is going to be an inclusion test. Okay, and the inclusion test is basically a cloud of points that gets tested whether or not it exists within a curve or a volume. We're going to start two-dimensionally for now. So what I'd like you to do is put up a rectangle in the top view. Again, we're keeping it two-dimensional, so just doing the top view. And we're going to populate this with some points. And the points can be done pretty smartly as well. So what I'm going to do, the way I'm going to do it is under param, I'm going to go to curve. I'm going to do my curve and surface and subdivide stuff that I typically do. So I'll set one curve, select that, pump it into a surface right here. The subdivide I'm going to do for this one is a little bit different. I'm far less concerned with subdividing it into panels. I just want a bunch of points on this surface. So I'm going to go to Surface, Utility, and Divide Surface. Okay, when you plug Divide Surface in, all it does is break down the surface into points across the entire thing. So this is a pretty dynamic tool, but it's not to be used lightly. Okay, so with this, we're going to increase the number of subdivided points. I'm going to do like a slider 0 to 20-ish. Yeah, something like that. It doesn't have to be exactly 20, but get it to look pretty dense. And then after that, turn it all off. So select all these things and hide it all. Okay, so we turned everything off, and the reason is we just need to create a profile. Okay, so get creative as you want to get, but don't spend much time on it, at least not right now. What I want you to do in Rhino is grab a spline or control point curve, interpolate curve, whatever you want to use, and I'm just going to draw a rather dynamic form in this field, like that. It's almost like a rubber ducky.
I was going to say it's more like I forgot. Upside down? Kind of like a turtle, coming out of its shell.
Yeah, I don't know about turtle.
Yeah, not bad.
Okay, so draw a profile like that, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a test. And the test is going to be dependent on the set of points that we have here and the curve that we created. So go to Curve and Analysis, and we're going to look at Point in Curve. And I'll put a tag on this one so you know where it came from. Now, this is one that you have to read very carefully. And the reason I bring this up, and I'm taking my sweet old time with it, is so that you get in the habit of reading the descriptions so you can learn how to do Grasshopper on your own someday. So what it's doing is it says test a point for a closed curve containment. When you read the input values, it's just P for the point or points, and C for the curve. That's simple enough. But when you look at the output side of it, it's a little more complicated. R is a relationship. Super weird, right? Relationship, but it's a number. So then you read the description and it says 0 equals outside, 1 equals coincident, and 2 equals inside. So, yes. Oh. So these numbers are going to be essentially a pattern that's going to help us modify the list of surfaces in order to isolate either the surfaces that are outside, coincident, or inside. Coincident is extremely rare. That almost will never happen. But anyway, so what we're going to do, we're going to take those points and we're going to plug it into P. And then I need to reference the other curve. That's this one here. And I'm going to plug that into C. So you won't see anything yet. That's because what it's all it's doing right now is checking to see whether or not these points are inside the curve. And they look like a whole bunch of zeros. I think we're going to have to really search to find the inside ones. There we go. There are some 2s. Right, so not every single one of them is going to be inside. That's fine. It is a really good practice, unless there's some very good reason not to flatten this, to flatten it. If you're only doing one analysis on one surface, I would say flatten it. But you're going to have to deal with grafting when you're doing this on multiple panels, for instance, if you have like a dynamic panel system that you want to test. So let's just flatten this right now. And so the zeros become the zeros, the 1s, and the 2s, in this case just 0s and 2s. That's going to be our way of determining how we're going to break apart this list. Now, the way that we have to break the list, it takes a few different forms. You could either sift the pattern, which you're kind of used to, or you can dispatch the pattern. And dispatch is going to split anything based off of what's called a Boolean pattern. Okay, so what do you guys know about Boolean patterns?
They like subtract.
What's that?
They subtract, like
Kind of. Well, so you guys know it from like the Rhino side of it, but Boolean is essentially a binary system, right? You have a form, and then you take a negative and you pull it out, right? So there's a positive and a negative, right? There's an A and a B. There's a 1 and a 0. There's a true and a false. That's a Boolean logic. So you could trace it all the way back through the math and stuff, but this is a trigger. It's almost like a switch for us that we can use in order to push information that way or push information this way. So we do that by testing whether or not the zeros are positive, or rather, sorry, let me go back a second, figure out the best way to explain this. We create a Boolean function which has to be a 1 and a 0 by testing whether or not the 0s and 2s are above or below a value of 1. Does that make sense? So you can't do a Boolean pattern with a 0 and a 2. So let's do it using math. And you're going to go to operators, and you're going to do, you can either do larger than or smaller than. It's up to you how you want to do it, but I'm going to do larger than. And so this is going to require a number to test. That's our list of 0s, 1s, and 2s. That. And then it's going to say the number to test against. And before I plug in that number, I need to know which way it's going to go. So the top value is greater than. So if I put in a value of 1, number 2 is greater than 1, and so it's going to go up here. If I do, or rather, that's going to be triggered as a true on this list. It'll be a false on that list, if that makes any sense. So let's put our value of 1 in there. like that. And let's take a look at the two lists. That's weird. They're both reading false. It shouldn't. Because it's 0 less than or equal to 1. Oh, greater than or equal to. Oh, right. Because there isn't a less than. Sorry. Hang on a moment. I need to get my logic straight. Right. So I forgot that larger than and smaller than are actually two separate components. So this is a singular splitting system. So you're either testing for larger than or you're either testing for smaller than. So you just need to choose whether or not equals to is relevant. In this case, it's not because we don't have any coincident points. So this list is going to show us falses and trues, and the trues are going to be split off into one system using a component called dispatch. Okay, so that's right here under set, list, and dispatch. So dispatch is going to ask for a list to filter. It's going to ask for a pattern. And that's the part where you kind of get to come full circle here. The list that we're splitting here is the list of points based off of the index that we tested for inclusion, which gave us our binary pattern. I know it's a little circular, but this is our list of points. This is our testing pattern. And what you're going to get is a set of points. And you guys, I'm just adding a param so that you can see it. Because if I select this, it's selecting both list A and B. But if I plug in that, I get the points that exist only inside the pattern. So it looks like this. Let me go back and recap before I close the thought. All right. So we created a cloud of points. Well, not really a cloud. We created a grid of points. We created a curve, and then we tested whether or not that set of points was, or whether or not each point in that set of points was inside or outside of that curve. It took the form of a list of zeros and twos, which wasn't a binary system for us, so we couldn't use dispatch. And so that we had to add in the larger than test in order to transition it to a binary system, which is true or false or 0 or 1, right? So that's how we got that. So I'll come around and troubleshoot unless there are general questions before I do that. Okay. Not too bad, right? It's pretty simple so far.